Hello, and welcome to the Viva Connections and SharePoint Framework Biweekly Sync. It is September 8th, 2022. I'm your host on this call, Patrick Rodgers. We've got a great call for you today. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but thank you for that update on the slide there. Great agenda as always. Latest updates around the SharePoint framework, patterns and practices, updates across the program, new community samples. We'll do our optional picture time with Together mode, and we've got two great demos today. The first from Ijaz, getting started with SPFx form customizer, and then Hugo on building SPFx solution with Azure Communication Services. So this is the ACS we encourage you to use. Moving on real quick, so opportunities to participate in the program. Folks often ask how they can get involved. I really encourage you, reach out, do a demo on this call. I know you are all out there doing great work for your customers and for your companies. And where appropriate, where it's okay to demo what you've done, please do reach out. There's a link down there in the bottom right corner. We'd love to have your demo on these calls. I think it is one of the best parts of these community calls is seeing all the great demos from everybody out there. I always learn something new and encourage you to reach out for a demo spot moving forward. Contributing on GitHub, of course, you can always report issues, submit pull requests, and help with issues and questions. If other folks have questions you might have an answer to, jump in there and help out. Always appreciated by everybody. And then you can provide feedback. How are these calls? How is the documentation? Where can we help? And positive feedback is okay too. If we're doing something you really like, we could try and do more of it. Next up is our page O links. Bunch of links on this page, but they go to developer videos, which are going to be topic-focused videos on how to learn various things, how to use Microsoft Graph, stuff about authentication, SharePoint Framework, Viva Connections, tons of great topical videos to get you started, or just review topics you might, not remember so great because it's been a while since you've worked on that particular area. We got our community videos. Those are going to be all the recordings of this call or other community calls. This is where you can find all of those if you want to catch up on a missed episode. As well, we've got a bunch of great open source organizations. So PnP, Office Dev, Microsoft Graph, SharePoint, and OneDrive all welcome your participation, your feedback, your contributions in various ways. They're all a little bit different, but all of them are open and welcome your participation. So jump in to any and all of those as you have time and interest. And then we've got wonderful sample galleries. The main one to remember there is the ak.ms/m365/samples. That will take you to the new unified sample gallery that aggregates up all the samples from these various other places to make it a little bit easier to find. And it has a little search feature. So it's a little bit easier than just digging through all the repositories and going through the samples folder by folder. So really great stuff there. Encourage you to check that out. But all of these things could be located from aka.ms/m365/community. That'll get you the patterns and practices landing page that has links out to all of this content, all of our community calls, as well as tons of other great resources. So aka.ms/m365/community. And then we've got a bunch of other community calls. So our weekly M365 platform call on Tuesdays is a Microsoft-hosted, Microsoft demoed one. And then the rest of these are more community-focused calls around community demos and what's going on in the community. So please do join as many of these as you have time. You can always catch up on the recordings should you miss one or just not have time. We're all busy and can't make every single call. So you can always check out the recordings, but those invites are at aka.ms/m365/calls to get all those public invites. So encourage you to come check that out. And next Tuesday on the platform call, that's the 13th of September, we've got Rabeb doing Microsoft Graph Postman scripts and advanced functionality. Ika doing build productivity tabs with Microsoft Teams Toolkit for Visual Studio, and Bob doing introduction to App Camp. So really excited to see all three of those things and encourage you to join us next Tuesday or do catch up with the recording should you not be able to make it. And with that, we'll move over to David for sharing is caring.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Well, friends, as you may or may not know, there are tons of opportunities to collaborate and participate and contribute to our community. But there may be a little bit of a landscape navigation that you need assistance with. Sharing is Caring is a program that provides you hands-on guidance and a safe space opportunities. That means that we're going to work right alongside you to submit, for example, samples to GitHub if you're not familiar with how to navigate that landscape. What's a pull request? How do you fork? Those kinds of things. We will do it right alongside with you. And we won't record it, which means it's a safe space to ask any and all questions that you may want to do. So feel free to join. We are getting more and more sessions scheduled now that we're coming out of summer. In fact, our Power Platform Samples contributor session is available live in real life, in fact, at the Power Platform Conference. So if you're coming up to the conference here in a couple weeks, that is a session that you can join in on. So we invite you to join that session live in person. It'll be fantastic. Now, once you have contributed, we want to recognize you for all the amazing work that you are doing. And we're doing that by our recognition program. This is a program that has been set up in connection with Credly. Yes, that same Credly that powers those badges you get when you're Microsoft certified. These badges will sit right alongside them in your account, and they can be shared on LinkedIn, Twitter, added to your LinkedIn profile, shared with clients, shared with managers. Let them know that you're making a difference. There is absolutely no cost, and we try to run all of our scripts each month to recognize those contributions. So we only need you to opt in once, aka.ms/M365PnP-recognition. Again, it is an annual thing. We will be updating these badges annually to recognize the work that you're doing each year. So you only need to opt in once, though, and we're coming out with new badges coming soon. I've been working with a number of different programs and organizations within Microsoft to help recognize you for the amazing work that you're doing in the community. So thank you all that have done that and signed up. And if you haven't yet, it's not too late. So just opt in at aka.ms/M365PnP-recognition. Patrick, back to you.
Great stuff. Thank you, David. Love seeing the sharing is caring continue to grow, and that recognition program is just outstanding. Love seeing everybody's badges online. I don't know where else I'd see them, but love to see them there. So SharePoint Framework updates with Vesa. Take it away.
Excellent. So let's go in here. So first of all, last week we released the SharePoint Framework 1.16 as a public preview. So this is a preview, not intended to be used in production. We're going to talk about what's in there as a reminder in upcoming slides. So let's go forward there. On the usage side, we did a all-time record on the daily usage, actually this week, Tuesday. You can see a massive growth on the adoption. And as you can see from historically, and there's always a bit slowness during summertime, and then the September, October, November are the most widely used growth months in the day-to-day places. What's actually kind of cool, I cannot go to details, but we did broke one really significant milestone. We are breaking that gray line with Tuesday's all-time record, which is pretty cool. It is a big number, but I don't have permissions to say what is the number, but we're talking about tens of millions of monthly active users for custom SharePoint Framework built components in the Microsoft 365. So a lot of people. Let's go to the following slide. 1.16, as said, was released last week. 1.15.2 was released in August. That is the latest version for production. And 1.16 is a preview version where we have a few key capabilities. We did show some of this stuff on the Tuesday call this week together with Alex Terentian. So I'll recommend you checking out that call if you're looking into exact details. What does that mean? There's going to be cool announcements related on Teams JavaScript SDK v2 as a native support to SPFx within this upcoming conferences. So there's a lot of interesting announcements coming up on making sure that those who are investing on the SharePoint framework can actually get their application even further available more in Microsoft 365. So really cool that we're building on top of existing investments rather than always inventing or introducing new stuff. But that's it from my side. Let's move to the following topic.
Great stuff. Thanks, Vesa, for those updates. And now we'll go to Julie for PnPjs updates.
Hey, thank you, Patrick. So version 3.7 to be released tomorrow, actually. We have, as always, general documentation updates. We have added, and thank you very much to Conrad, support for SP favorites. Great pull request from him, really thorough and complete, and it was a joy to see. We have fixed some search and filter parameters for graph paging behavior. We added the ability to rate an item in SharePoint 1 through 5. That's another pull request from a community member. More improvements for query escaping. We're cleaning that up, and I think that work is now complete. Some enhancements for copy by path and move by path. We had some extra properties we wanted to make available to make that those actions more customizable. And Patrick added a lovely sample for ACS auth behavior, a recipe for that if you need it. As always, any of the PRs that are merged during the month will show up in our nightly build. So if you see one of those PRs merged, it's something you're interested in, you want to check it out, please feel free to use our V3 nightly builds that go out nightly and, well, obviously from the name, I suppose. And that'll give you that new functionality. You can test it out. And don't forget to follow us, M365 PnPjs on Twitter. We give all our updates there. Anytime there's issues or new releases, you will see it there. We also do post on LinkedIn for the PnP team. So thank you very much. And back to you, Patrick. And congratulations on your long run. It was wonderful to have you leading us.
Oh, well, thank you very much for that. Thank you for those wonderful updates. And with that, we'll go to Gary for the CLI updates.
Thank you very much, Patrick. So hi, everyone. We have released a new version of CLI for Microsoft 365. We have released 5.7, the back end of last month. So it's been out for about a week. So this is the roll-up of all the enhancements that we've delivered through the beta releases throughout the month. So we've added support for Microsoft Bookings, for improvements to Azure Active Directory app registrations, permissions, management in SharePoint, Microsoft Search, and also SharePoint Framework as well. So how can you get this new release? So use the latest tag on npm, so at pnp/CLI-Microsoft 365 at latest. You can also use our Docker container as well that provides all of the environment, all the dependencies for you to run the CLI and just use it with the least amount of effort. So if you're interested in just trying it out, that's a great place to start. Check out our release notes. There's lots of other enhancements and bug fixes that we've added in there as well, as usual. If you want to keep up with the latest and the greatest for the CLI, best place to find that out is on Twitter. So follow us at CLI Microsoft 365. If you want to get in touch, if you have an idea, if you want to see what's being worked on, please look at the GitHub repository, either the issues or the discussions. We've got lots of activity going on at the moment. We're looking at commands for managing versions and more role assignments, OneNote notebooks, and more Power Platform commands as well, which we know is something that a lot of people are looking for. So if you're interested in either of those, please check them out, get involved in the conversation, and help us build the best commands that we can for you. So one extra thing, we are looking at releasing V6. So we've got a timeline of around November for V6. This is going to be the next major version. There'll be breaking changes, but we're going to release upgrade guidance early and give you the ability to test that out way in advance as well before that release. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all the contributors for this month. Without you, this obviously would not be possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary, for those wonderful updates about the CLI, and we will move on now to the reusable components. So React Controls 3.10 is out. The React Controls, again, are the ones designed to be used in the body of your web parts or application customizers. That's been updated for SPFx 115.2, as well as the ability to override field rendering for individual fields in dynamic form and various other fixes. And then the property controls are at 3.9.0. That's an update for 115.2 support. You can see the release notes there. Those the property controls, are designed to be used in the edit pane of your web parts. So definitely, if you haven't checked out the reusable controls yet, and I don't know why you wouldn't have, but do check them out. It's a great way to jumpstart your SharePoint Framework projects, save you a ton of time and a ton of effort to get some great experiences for your users. And finally, last up is PnP Modern Search, aka.ms/PnP Search. This is all about building a modern search experience with flexible web parts for your users. So 4.7.0 release, that's the June release. Thank you to everybody who helped out there. That's support for adaptive card rendering and a few other features and fixes as well. So definitely check out the modern search capabilities. And then we've got the version 3. Do encourage you to update to version 4. Version 3 branch no longer really getting updates. So do update to version 4 when you get a chance. And with that, we'll go to Hugo for the samples.
Thank you, Patrick. So we have some samples in a few repositories, the SPFx extensions and the SPFx web parts, and these are the latest updates. We have an update to the list form by Rosa Alice, who fixed issues with rich text fields, with date fields, not allowing manually entering dates, and fixing an issue with the caret, where not the bunny carrot, but the thing that blinks when you edit a rich text field, where it went on the first line. We have a new web part called Copy Views by Martin, which allows you to copy views between document libraries. We have an update to the script editor by Salas CZ, who added support for section background color so that you can blend in the web part a little bit easier. Julie has updated the PnPjs sample with fixing bugs for the PnPjs config and updating dependencies to 1.15.2. We have a new group membership manager by Nick Brown, which allows you to, the name says, manage members of groups. And we have a new web part from Siddharth, which allows you to add form customizers to lists, which is a new feature that we introduced recently with the latest version of SPFx. We welcome contributions, always love to see cool samples. Please don't hesitate to create your pull requests. And speaking of cool pull requests, we have another repo for ACE samples. David, why don't you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Hugo. Unfortunately, we have no new samples this week to cover and talk about, but we do love new samples. They are absolutely open to be contributed to. And if you'd like to see all the samples, you can do that at aka.ms/m365/samples. Don't hesitate to check them all out. And if you have any questions about this repo, please don't hesitate to reach out. Patrick, back to you.
Awesome stuff. Thank you all for those updates there. And we'll jump over to our optional picture time. At this point, usually Vesa or David will take over the old presentation.
Yep, I'll do that. So let me share my screen and move everybody in here. We have 50 seats in the room.
I'm going to turn on my video today.
There we go. I will put my video on as well. Let's see, 50 seats, 50 seats. We still have 14 seats, 13, 12 seats left. Just guessing, I don't calculate that fast. Fewer, wait. One more row. There we go, one more row. I know that's, or is it full? It's full, it is full. Let me put the recording on. Wait for it. And let's do some hand waving, everybody. Thank you, everybody, once again on joining here. We love these GIF animations. We'll get them included in the blog post summary and share in the social media. Thanks, everybody. Really great to see you in the call. Awesome.
And with that, we will jump over to our first demo, which is Jazz. If you want to go ahead and take over the presentation and get started.
Sure. So today, guys, I'm presenting about the SPFx form customizer. It's a new feature has been released recently. My name is Ijaz Hussain. I work for a company called Content and Cloud, and here is my Twitter if you want to get in touch. So what is the SPFx form customizers extension? I mean, if you have worked in, like me, InfoPath forms, if you have worked in custom list pages and injected your custom web part into those pages in classic SharePoint sites and build some navigation around the item IDs and stuff, then this is heaven. So we have now, is a long-awaited feature where we can override the list experience or library experience using the SPFx. So that's really, really great. So I wanted to try out. I wanted to see how we can put things together, and potentially, we'll be building an application for the customer going forward. So what basically to get this started? So what's involved? There's a couple of steps I've listed here, 5 of them. So we need to create a basic list or library structure using content types. That's I would recommend. Use the content types. Then you create a customizer extension project using SPFx. Then we have to configure and start doing some debugging. And then once we're done, we deploy our solution to App Catalog. And the last step is we need to associate our custom component we build here. We need to do the associate with our the content type of the list. So let's get started. How we can get so I'm going to show you demo first. So that is the customer list. So I've added some dummy data here. Now this list, it's based on this content type, which is a customer, and I've kept it really, really basic for the demo. So you can see I have some fields, and one of the fields is a project, is lookup field, and which is basically point to this list, which is a project. So this project doesn't have any content type, but you can add a content type here if you want to. But my customer list based on the customer content type. This is the structures. First, we need to create a structure. So once we know our list is there, our content type is there, the next step is to create your solution, which you just simply, if I scroll up, I've just listed in my blog here. So once you create a structure, so you basically, this is where you say, okay, select the extension, then what type of client-side extension you want to create, select the form customizer, and then the rest is going to all create for you. So, and then once we have that solution created, then we go ahead and do some configuration here. But before we go into the configuration, let me show what's that look like in demo, and then I'll get back to the code and how we can configure, and then how we can debug, and how we can at the end associate our content type so that it's when we click on edit or view, it open up our custom view. So let me open up the view mode. Let's suppose if I open this item, so if I click on my one of the items, so you can see. So at this point, now from this is how I would envisage. So from here onwards down, so you have a literally blank canvas. You can build whatever you want to build. You can build custom forms, step forms, model forms, or whatever you want to build. So basically, we have all that space for us right from the list environment. So here, I'm in the view mode. As you could see, I've just clicked there, and this is my view mode. And so the main idea for me behind, or for the feedback I get from the customers is, right, so especially with a couple of points, okay, they want to change the layout. So, you have opportunity to build different layouts, like you have 2 columns. They want to have, when selecting playing around with the lookup columns, you always had let's suppose you have a massive list of the lookup column and you want to search and select. It was really hard out of the box. So you have to all the way scroll down, and so it's really hard navigation if you have 1,000 item in the lookup list. So that was another pain point. And if you have to navigate and see, for example, at this point, I want to go and see my project detail, you can go right from this page. So you don't have to go and switch to different page to see the detail of your lookup list. So that's really cool. So everything is on this page. And then from here, I've also, so you don't have to go and add it from the list, or you can build the custom links here. So if I want to edit this particular record, you can just click on edit. It takes you to the edit page, and then you can do here. So in here, I've tried to add some custom fields just for demo purposes. So we know, we have capability now to build some custom stuff. So for example, I have the latest modern taxonomy picker control. In here, with the PnPjs I've added in there, then some select lists can add select. Then this is the outlook, the lookup column bit I was talking about. So now I can basically, if I need some item, let's say project 110, I simply can get there, select this, add into my associated, etc., and submit. So I don't have to, or I can cancel this. So I can select and navigate through here, or I can select this whole page, etc. So this is kind of a example of what possible things we can build now with using this form customizer. So that's really, really great. So yeah, so if I can simply go to say submit, it's going to go and submit the page, and then it's going take you back to the list, and the list will be updated. So that's the demo. So let me go and show you how I build and what it looks like in the code. So that's the point where, we have run the geoman generator to create our project. So once we are in there, the first thing you want to go into the serve.json file. Now this will be created for you, so you don't have to do much in there, but a couple of properties you have to change. First one is a page URL. The page URL, make sure this part of the URL, which is, if I you make sure it's point to your site. So you have a different forms properties. One for the, so this is the default. One is the new form. One is the added form. One is the view form. And what they have is, one thing is, first off, make sure you are pointing to your site. So don't change the last bit of this URL from the layout. This needs to be same. You can see. Then the component ID will remain the same, so don't change this one. So page type is another thing which you can determine which page you are in, whether you are in the edit mode. So 8 is the new, 6 is the edit, and the 4th is the view. And then you have a root folder of the list. So this is the list which I'll be using. And then if you have any custom property, the ID is there as well. But what happened is when you run the gulp serve, so let me go back to debug there. So we've done this. Then there's a gulp serve command, which we normally do. But the idea is you can always open up a specific configuration, passing the parameter, say config equal to customer underscore added form, in my case, which will point to this one. And this basically what happened is the URL, it takes that URL, it get the component ID, page type, root folder, everything, and then open that added form for me with the ID equal to 1. But you can go to the browser. Once it's open, you can easily change ID to, whatever other item you wanted to retrieve from. So that is just a starting point, but you can basically change the ID here to get the different items in the list. So at this point, we can see like a blank. And then let me go back to the code now in terms of the building our demo. It's really, really simple. So a couple of things you have to consider. In here, I'm getting the customer. So wherever when you click it, so we're getting some context. In the context, we will have all of the information about the list, all about the item. So that's really great. So once the page load, or when we open any items, if it is not a new one, I'm gonna grab the item ID, list title, and get the customer detail. And then within this call in the SharePoint service, I'm getting the related to the project detail as well. So I'm passing this data to my main component. But there's another thing which it did is, as I've shown you previously, you can build the added URL by yourself. You can see here. So user doesn't have to go to the list and do that. You can basically navigate from your custom form. So this is how I build, basically using source item IDs. You get server relative URL. So you can hook it up all together, and then it will open up the added form or add new form from your form. So I'm passing those items properties to my component, and then from there, I'm just building a customer form, one big component here, and so it's not massive solution, just simple one component I'm building here. But the idea is, so let me show you when we finish our saving data, so we have to call this props.onSave, which is that method exists here. Basically, you have to call this method when you have done your changes have been submitted to the list, so that it can complete the whole life cycle of the save. So, and then if you close, then you have this form.close method. You need to call this one. So yeah, this and that was in terms of the building the form. I'm using in terms of the UI, depend on I'm using both Fluent UI. And I'm also using a custom library, which is called NT Design. So yeah, please check this out if you're interested. It's really, really good. So now coming back to the last step. Okay, we're done at this point. We're done debugging. We're done build. We're done with build of our application. Now we need to deploy that. So by default is not gonna we need to associate our component, which the component ID we define, and the serve.json you can see here. So we need to associate that with our list, so that when we click on, as I click on my list, it open up our custom form, right? So that's the last step. What you need to do is basically, I have created a custom function in there. So I've used the CSOM way of doing it. So what I've done is basically I've got the customer, and then once I've got the customer list, and then there is 3 properties has been exposed, which are in that content type, which my list is associated. So which is new form, component side ID, added form, and display mode. So make sure pass that component ID, you have it here, which is this 161D23. Your one will be different, so that your custom component in that list has these three properties are associated. Once it's done, then every time you click on any of the list item, the custom form either is added, new, or detail view will open up. So yeah, if you get this code, it's in here. I've put into this is my blog, so you can go through there. I will be submitting this to the PnP repo, but you can also get the C# code of the function at the bottom of this here as well. So that's all from me. If you have any question.
Great stuff. If you want to, there might be a couple of questions there in the chat. You can take them up there. But for now, we're going to move over to Hugo. So awesome stuff, Jazz. And Hugo, if you're ready to go, take it away.
Hi, everybody. My name is Hugo Bernier, and today I'm going to be talking to you about building SharePoint Framework solutions using Azure Communication Services integration. And we'll talk about what that is very shortly. But the sample that I'm going to be showing you today was actually built by João Mendes, and it's a like everything that João does. It's a very cool sample that is very comprehensive in terms of how it was built and everything. And the one thing that I want to make clear is that sometimes in our SPFx sample, we have some samples that are very simple because they illustrate a concept. And we have some samples that are, I would say academically perfect. They have pretty much everything included in this sample. And this is definitely one of them. Don't let that scare you. The sample is a great way to understand some of the advanced concepts. It helps you understand also how to structure your solution and things like that. And we want to make sure that you're not always stuck with only advanced samples. We want to make sure that sometimes you have samples that are just to show you a concept, because everyone has to start at level 100 at some point. But once you're ready to look at more advanced samples, this is definitely going to be one of them. All right, so let's talk about Azure Communication Services. What is Azure Communication Services? It's basically an Azure service that you can use to do some really cool stuff, including things like voice and video calling, rich text chat, SMS, and email. And I'm not a smart person, so when I think about Azure Communication Services, I kind of think about Teams as a service, right? So imagine if you could actually take all the functionality in Teams and put it as a service in Azure, and that's really what it is. Now, a much smarter person might actually think of it as communication platform as a service. That's really what the official term for Azure Communication Services is. Now, if I go to Azure and I go create an Azure Communication Services, all I need to do here is I go to Azure, I click on Create a Resource, and then I'll search for Communication Services, if I can type properly. There you go. And I'll just click on Create. Now, once I create this, I'll have to pick my subscription. Again, I like to use my MSDN subscription, and I'll create a resource here. Now, I already created a resource before this, so it's going to screen at me, but I'll just pretend that I'm creating a new one. All right, and once that's created, I'll get something like this that will say, here's your Azure subscription, here's your resource. And you'll see that right away, it allows me to do things like building some chat and telephony and voice and video services. But the magical thing here that we are looking for is right here, the keys. If we look at the keys, we have connection strings that we can use. And the connection strings are going to be pretty much the thing that we're going to need to integrate into our applications to be able to connect to this communication services from our own applications. The other thing that you should probably take a look at is that there is a quick start section in the Azure Communication Services, and there's lots of cool samples you can use, but one of the ones we're going to look at in particular today is the Get Started with the Group Calling Hero sample. And so let's do some demo. when you go to the Azure Communication Services kind of sandbox, you'll actually get access to these components here. And the cool thing about this is that if you think about the complexity of building a chat functionality or video, video functionality, or anything like that that Teams provides you, you'd have to create a lot of components and connect them together and everything. So the Azure Communication Services folks have actually created composite controls and UI controls that you can use to actually build your samples. So you've got a whole bunch of different use cases that we can use here. And you'll see that there's two types of libraries. There's composite controls, like I said, which are combined components together. And those are designed to make it easy for you to integrate with Fluent UI design, to actually have your kind of layout control in a very consistent way. And you can inject some data model. But if you want to go even further, you want to inject your own CSS or your own experience and things like that, you can use the individual UI components, the individual Lego blocks, if you will, and put them together. So for example, here we have a call composite component that allows you to actually call the functionality, and it'll pretty much create the experience for you. And if you see, all you need to do is you import an adapter, you import the composite, and then in your code, you'll actually call this component here and say, this is what I want. I want this adapter. I want these options, and so on and so forth. Now, I've actually built that for you. And here's a chat composite if I just wanted to do chat functionality. But let me show you the call composite. So here I have the call composite. It's running as a website in Azure. And I'll actually join this meeting. See if this is like meetingception. So this is this meeting. We should be able to see if the demo gods are with me. Let me just make sure that I picked the right camera here. Yes, my NVIDIA broadcast. Turn it on. And hello. And what I'll do here, I should be able to see this exact presentation. Now I'm going to mute myself here. Actually, I don't need to mute myself. You can see that I'm in the demo, and this is going to start going crazy here. All right, so let me get out of this demo, and let me actually show you the web part that our friend Joao built using one of those composite components. All right, so we have here this is a screenshot from Joao's sample. He's got two versions of the same web part in two different pages, so he can demonstrate here acting as two individuals, one who's fox and one who's mouse. And you'll see that Joao added the ability to pick your own avatar, the ability to have kind of this room chat pane, and then to be able to do things like who's in the chat, leave the chat, hide the participants, and do things like that. It's a very cool feature here. And if I just kind of mouse over here, again, we have leave chat, we have the participants, the list of participants, and we have even things like the typing indicator and things like that. A lot of this is actually provided by the composite controls. What's unique here is that Joao put it together in a SharePoint Framework solution. Let's go quickly through what the code does. All right. So first of all, like every other sample that Joao builds, the structure is always awesome. It's very easy to understand. So you'll see here that Joao has broken the sections into assets and components and constants and things like that. But the thing that we're going to pay attention today is the web part itself, the room chat web part. And let's go into this. In the render function of the web part, you'll see that all that Joao does here is he calls the room chat component, but he also passes the parameters or the attributes that we want, the props, I guess is the term I should be using. And he'll pass two things in particular, the topic that he wants to show and the connection string, which we saw earlier in my settings in Azure Communication Services. And then where we get the ACS connection string and the topic is in the property pane configuration. So that thing that pops up when you add a web part, where we can now specify the topic we want to show and the connection string. Now, what Joao does is he actually passes those attributes to the chat component. So in my components area, I have a room chat component. And the room chat component, really what it's got is something that calls a room chat control. Now, there's a whole bunch of other things about the global state provider and things like that that just makes it easy to store the information about the web part globally, but we'll skip that because we're limited on time. But inside of that, I've got my room chat control, and you'll see that the room chat control is broken down into smaller controls as well. So I've got my errors, I've got my ability to join, I've got my configuration, I've got my panel. We'll focus on the panel because that's the part that you saw in the demo today. But the panel is really, again, included in a chat panel control. And I'll spare you from having to go into that because the chat panel control calls the chat control. And the chat control has the same components we saw earlier, where it's got the chat adapter and the chat composite and the avatar persona data, which is exactly what you saw when I was showing you the composite controls from the Azure Communication Services team. What he's doing is he's actually embedding the chat composite component, and he's passing the Fluent theme from the web part and the adapter that will connect to Azure Communication Services. The adapter is actually created earlier using React hooks. And so what we do here is we do a create adapter, and we pass things like the display name, the user ID, the credentials, and the thread ID. And then in the hook section, this is kind of brilliant. What Joao does is he's got a use ACS API hook that he can use, making it easier for him to embed ACS APIs within his application. So he's got the context here that he passes with the connection string and all that stuff. He's got the person's email address that we extract from the context, as well as their display name so that we can understand who's chatting. And then we call the communication identity client from the Azure Communication Services APIs to authenticate and do all that stuff. And guess what? We get to pass that connection string that we used earlier in our configuration. So that's really how Joao does all this information. He's actually doing something beautiful by using a lot of components that were pre-built and then really wrapping it into SharePoint Framework. Now, there's different ways to approach this. You know, in this case, Joao is actually using a connection string that is passed into a property pane. But what if you didn't want your users to have to know the connection string? There's something that you could use in your web parts, which is called online or SharePoint Online tenant properties. And the tenant properties are things that you can use for your entire tenant and store them so that all the web parts and all the extensions can actually consume those properties. So for example, here I can use REST, or I can use the online management shell, PowerShell, or the CLI from Microsoft 365 to set those properties. And then in my web part, I can retrieve those properties. So instead of copying the connection string in every web part or asking every user when they drop the web part to copy and paste the connection string, I could set that globally. So think of that in ways of when you have stuff that, again, you don't want to share widely. Now, the one thing I want to make clear is these properties are actually, they're going to be read by the web part. So this is not hiding the connection string or anything like that. If you wanted to hide it, you'd want to use something like Azure Key Vault or something like that. But this is a great way to centrally store things. And all you need to do within your code is to call the get storage entity and pass a key, and then you'll get a response that will have the information. So if I wanted to do this in my code, I would probably do something like this. I'll say get storage entity, and I would pass a key called Azure connection string. I would have previously stored the connection string using the methods I showed above. And then I would get something like this, which would be a JSON structure that would tell me all the information about the connection string, including the value, which is hidden here. And I could use that in my web part. So those are, again, two different ways. You can use property panes, or you can use tenant properties to store information that you want to use in your solutions, in your web parts. And again, if you wanted to write the property, you would just use, like in this case, if I wanted to use the SPO management shell, I would just set SPO storage entity and pass the string. But that's pretty much it for the sample from Joao. You can find the code at the URL here. Now, of course, I don't expect you to be able to type that really quickly. If you go to aka.ms/SPFX webparts and just look for room chat, you'll be able to find it. If you want to learn more about the controls that I used for the video part or the Joao used for the chat part, you can actually go to aka.ms/ACS storybook. But that's it for me. And back to you, Patrick.
Awesome stuff as always, Hugo. Thank you. So I want to thank Ejaz and Hugo for those great demos. Really fantastic stuff from both. I encourage you to check those out a little bit more following the links. And now I just want to say a few things, mostly to say thank you to all of you for letting me host this call for so long and not kicking me out. That means a lot to me. I think this has been a fantastic experience for me and hopefully for all of you along the journey as well. I'm incredibly proud of the work that all of you have done, building this community, submitting these samples, and learning together. It's really, really fantastic to see that and to have been a small part of creating this space for all of you to excel. And I know you will continue to excel. And I encourage you to keep submitting for the demo spots. I'm really, really, really excited for what we're going to do next. We're going to have a revolving set of hosts for this call. We might settle that, onto a couple hosts later, but we're going to have a bunch of great folks coming on to host this call in the future. I'm not aware of any big format changes for the call, so do please continue to submit your samples, continue to do the great work you're all doing out there, and I've just been so honored to be a part of this community and to be a part of creating this forum. So thank you to all of you. And just as a side note, no big announcements for me. I'm not going to a different job or switching companies or not truly retiring, which is a shame because, man, if I could retire. But I'm going to do step back a little bit, but working on improving some stuff behind the scenes for PnP across our different repositories and samples and just kind of program related stuff. So I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be around. No big announcements, but just wanted again genuinely to say thank you to all of you for being part of this. It has been a joy. There was much rejoicing. So thank you. The recording, as always, will be available in about 24 hours on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter at those places there. And our next call, hosted by somebody else, will be September 22nd in 2 weeks on Thursday. Our next general dev call will be September 15th, same time. That's in 1 week, next week. And you can get all those community call links at ak.ms/m365/calls. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye. Bye.